Okay, thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us on another interview that we're having. The Mortgage Center is hosting a series of interviews called The New Normal, Conversations with Thought Leaders on Local Emerging Trends. And we've got Mayor Cam Guthrie, who is the Mayor of City of Guelph, joining us today. So, hi, Cam.
Hello, thanks for having me.
This is wonderful. Thanks for setting aside the time. I'm just going to jump right into the questions. So under this new normal, there are some, and as things open up in the city, are there some rules that we should be aware of as a community when interacting with each other?
Yes, well, I think that the first thing whenever I hear the word rules and or guidelines, it's good to always be reminded that they're always coming from a public health. That's really where the source of any of these rules or guidelines are coming from. And so for us, the Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Public Health and our Chief Medical Officer is the one that is, empowered to make suggestions for those rules and for those ways that we need to engage with each other. The physical distancing, of course, is the one rule I think everyone is aware of right now. And I believe that will be in place for quite some time. I'm hearing rumors that the province may start to lift some things. But even if the province decides to loosen some rules up in regards of how we're going to interact with each other, it's still actually the authority still rests with all of the little public health units all scattered across the province. Because you might have a place where, it's hypothetically up north, there's just no issues. There's no COVID, there's nothing going on.
Right.
And so their rules up there might be a little bit different than, let's say, Toronto or let's say Guelph as an example. So the rules are probably going to, morph and evolve and change a little bit as we go here. And so we need to always make sure we're listening to public health. But, the greetings are going to change. I haven't shaken someone's hand in a couple of months now, just hard for a politician, I know.
Right.
But it's definitely going to be a new way of sort of interacting and engaging with each other for sure.
Right. So then we just have to be careful. We know if we're going to be traveling, let's just say to Fergus or Elora, the guidelines may be different than in Guelph. Is that true?
Well, yeah, it could be. It would probably be known a little bit more. One of the things that, from a rules perspective is, of course, the physical distancing, of course, the washing of hands. But the new one that's sort of been entered into the conversation the last little while is when physical distancing is not available, when it's difficult to do that, then everyone is suggesting that you must wear a mask. And that wearing of a mask is not really to protect yourself. It's actually to protect others, just in case you have the virus and you don't know it. You want to make sure that you're being kind to other people and wearing a mask. So whether that's in Guelph or Fergus or Toronto or wherever you might be traveling to, just always remember, of course, that rule about the mask.
I'm wearing them.
Yeah. Top of physical distancing and washing of hands.
Yeah, I know it's interesting because that kind of guideline has really changed since the beginning of the pandemic. And I know we've got our cloth masks at our house. Yeah. And of course, I'm kind of I'm like the health person of my family, right? I'm like, okay, guys, make sure you wash your hands. Make sure you, I don't want to gender stereotype, but that's just my role in the family. Sure. And my husband, was sort of a little bit slower to implement the mask rule, right? Just because, that guideline has really evolved since the beginning of the pandemic. And we had a really great conversation. And to your point around, wearing a mask, it just shows that you're respecting someone else's health as well, right? Not just your own health. Like, we want to make sure that everybody's staying safe. So I'm glad you brought that up. And my husband was a bit slow, and my 15-year-old teenage son was a little bit slow to implement that. But, again, it's just a sign of showing respect for other people and taking care of yourself, right? Yeah, awesome.
Now, at all, just show, your husband and son, the mayor, telling them to do these things. The mayor.
Yeah, there you go. And I know you're also protecting yourself when you're out in public too, right? So that's just good role modeling for everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you. So can you maybe talk a little bit about the permanent changes that we need to be aware of at the city?
Yeah, that's good. And that's a good question. It's an evolving answer as well. Permanent changes, busing, permanent changes, the River Run Center where the theater is, of course, our sports fields, basically where there's a lot of gathering, whether that even be when City Hall opens back up. Normally City Hall is this big open lobby area and you can come up to a desk and interact with our staff. Well, no longer. That's going to probably be more gated, if I could call it that way, and have the plexiglass everywhere. And so there's all these changes that are going to be coming for the new normal, as people are saying it.
Right.
And so those changes are, really in a way going to be somewhat permanent changes until some type of a vaccine or something like that can be developed. And we know that we're completely not just flattening the curve, but crushing the curve. And
Yeah, perfect.
virus is behind us, right? So there's going to be lots of new things that are going to probably be in place for a long time. Even small things like at City Hall, like doors, like instead of handles, it could be now you're waving your hand and the door opens more. In the bathrooms, instead of paper towel and put, thing for the paper towel,
Yeah.
wave your hand and not have to talk. Like all these little things are going to be the new way of having to interact with any of the city assets anyways.
Right. And I know a lot of people rely on public transportation, like to get to school, to their jobs. Can you maybe talk a little bit about how that's going to evolve as well?
Yeah, so for the last few months, it has been no boarding at the front door where the driver is, and that's also where our fare boxes were. And so that's where you paid. So because we had to protect the drivers, people couldn't come in the front door. So they
Right.
had to be entering into the rear door. And then, of course, with physical distancing, you can only have 9 people on the bus, 9 in the driver. And so it's been, we made transit free because we couldn't get the money anyways, because the fare boxes were,
Right.
and that happened with every city. And we have that in place right now until the end of June. So it's been free for like 3 or 4 months, I guess, in total. And of course, that's been one of the biggest expense hits, loss of revenue to the bottom line. But we
Right.
had to do
Yeah.
it because of the health, and it was also deemed an essential issue. So moving forward, as
Yeah.
you're talking about masks, as the limit of 10 probably starts to be a little bit more relaxed, you're gonna see all transit authorities start to say, hey, if there's gonna be more than 10, you gotta have a mask on, and that's again the courteous thing to do as
Yeah.
we
That's
start going, because people to be moved around, and we're a university town too. So you can think about
right.
we're trying to think about how are we moving 20,000 students that might be coming back in the fall. I'm unsure what the university is going to be deciding in regards to that completely. But we don't have just our own residents, of course, that we have to take care of, but we have to always remember as a university college town, we have all those thousands of students coming back too.
Yeah, no, interesting. And I don't envy you and the city of all the work that you guys have cut out for you. But to kind of can you? I know you often get questions about like the hospital, and obviously that's on everybody's mind. But can you just give us a reminder of what's under the city's jurisdiction? And what do you guys have, just to kind of couch that on what's under the provincial guidelines and federal? Maybe just focus on what's under the city's jurisdiction.
Yeah, so when it comes to this issue, and it's interesting, uh, not much. We can't, like, we have no authority over any of the health. That's the Public Health Board.
Okay.
And that's the Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph, and they're a legislated body from the provincial government.
Okay.
So the city of Guelph funds a portion of that, but we have no direct oversight over it. It's their own entity. Hospital, of course, is healthcare. That's a provincial issue, and even education, of course, is a provincial issue. You're right. I get asked about the hospital all the time, but that is a provincial issue. And so when it comes to us, you got to think about more of the things that are like the things that we interact with every day, like public transit or a theater or a park or a library or a rec center, things like that. Of course, our paramedics, our police, our fire, our first responders, that's under us as well. And so, I especially think about our first responders, of course, during this COVID time, right? I mean, they
Right.
keep plowing through and do their job, especially our paramedics. So
Right.
those are the things that are under our watch and that we are responsible for. And then, of course, there are things that we fund with taxpayers' money that are mandatory, but we
Okay.
don't have direct oversight on the operations of those things. There are other jurisdictions.
So, speaking of that, so what is the city what is the city doing with some of the things that are under your jurisdiction?
Yeah, so that's it. I guess the way to answer that would be, one of the things that I started a month ago almost was the mayor's task force on economic recovery. So we've got about 28 to 30 different people from all different cross sections across the city that have met 3 times now, or about to meet for a 4th time coming up. And that is something that we're really pushing along with the city staff on how can we help with the economic recovery, the success of business, to really bounce back in a way that will probably also not be normal as we
Right.
figure out how to support our businesses. And that's something that I really hope we have some recommendations coming up in the next couple weeks to a month or more that will roll out how we're supporting the opening of the economy. And of course, we
Excellent.
hope to do that in partnership with other levels of government as well, because it can't all be done on the backs of property taxpayers at a local level.
Yeah, well, interesting you say the property taxes because, the Mortgage Center, we help people get homes. And I know we've had a lot of clients contact us to help them defer some of their mortgage payments because of job loss and things like that. And I do believe that the city also had a property tax deferral system too.
Yes, we did. So we're deferring all property tax payments until July 31st right now. And there's going to be like no interest, no penalties, no interest fees, no collection calls, things like that. And so we're trying to do what we can to help. And it's kind of a good question from the last one, under the jurisdiction. That's something that we're
Perfect.
able to do. But we're not legally allowed to write checks to people or to businesses or to help with staff or employees or landlord and tenants. That's all
Right.
under the federal and the provincial government. So it's easy for people to look at the mayor and whoever the mayor is.
Oh, surprise!
Answers on all that kind of stuff and help on all that kind of stuff. But there is a lane that the municipality needs to stay in, especially the way municipalities are funded, mostly through property taxes only, that we need to be very careful on what we are and are not doing, and let the provincial government and let the federal government stay in their own lanes and help under their jurisdiction.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. It's an interesting topic, and I just want to press in on this a little bit while we're at the property. I've been driving by. My son has a fledgling lawn care business, and remember, he's like a 15-year-old.
Awesome.
It's just and we were driving down to the south end of the city, and just noticed like the normal places that are really nicely manicured. The public places, the areas aren't being mowed anymore. So maybe talk a little. Would you mind just addressing that in light of the property tax deferral, and just maybe trying to be. Obviously people's health is first and foremost, but there also is a bit of fiscal responsibility there, right?
Yes, good question. So part of our fiscal responsibility in our reaction to everything that's occurred, we have both an expense that we've had to have expenses in related to COVID, we've also lost a lot of revenue because of COVID. Transit as an example, we have 90% less ridership and zero revenue, but we have to keep it open as an essential service. That's just one example. So the city of Guelph, like other cities, have had to make some really big changes in regards to how they've reacted to this, along with, of course, allowing a deferral of property tax, which is the cash flow that cities need throughout the year to pay for the critical services that we need, like transit and paramedics and fire and police and all those kind of things. So what's happened is we've actually had to let go. We did this at the beginning of April. We let go over 600 part-time people, and of course, those people are normally ones like that would do grass cutting and gardening and rec center, lifeguards and things like that. And then a couple weeks after that, we let go of another 120 or so full-time. And the
That's
library,
a difficult decision, right? Yeah.
But we had to, from a fiscal accountability point of view. So even with letting go of those people at this time, and it was very difficult to make those decisions because they're family and they do a good service, obviously, but we have a fiscal accountability role. And so we're looking at about a $12 million deficit right now. And because of the mitigation factors that we've taken into place, such as laying off people, delaying capital projects, delaying hiring, those types of things, we've looked at trying to mitigate just about $9.8 million of that $12 million deficit, because municipalities by law are not allowed to run deficits. They're the only level of government that's not allowed.
Wow, okay.
And so that's why you're hearing a lot municipalities like me and others joining the chorus to get help from the provincial and the federal government, because they have much more fiscal capacity and different fiscal tools that enable them to help with the loss of operating both revenue and the operating expenses that municipalities have had to fight COVID. We have no way of doing that other than to lay off people, defer capital projects, go into debt, have deficits, which we're not allowed to do. And it's so these are some of the problems, and that's why you're not seeing all the nicely manicured parks right now. They are getting done by our full-time staff when they can get to it, but we don't have the capacity now because we're trying to be accountable from a fiscal point of view.
That's great. Thank you, Cam. That wraps up our conversation today. Where can people find this information if they're curious, and just to kind of keep up to date with what's happening?
Yeah, it's really easy, guelph.ca. And when you go to guelph.ca, at the very top, there's like a red banner, a box that says
You can't miss it.
You just press that button, and then it takes you to everything. And what we did is we put all the links for both provincial and federal and municipal all on that site.
Excellent.
So good portal for people to go and just get daily updates, any kind of resources or any kind of links to where they can try to maybe get some information about funding or grants or things like that from the upper levels of government.
That's great. Thank you, Cam. So we're going to sign off. For those of you who, thank you so much for your time. To learn more about the Mortgage Center and the great things that we do, you can check us out online at skipthebank.ca. Thanks, Cam. Have a good day. Thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, take care.
Bye for now. Bye.